Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and Diablo 4. Over 2 weeks ago, I ranked the classes in order based on the current performance in both tier 100s, Uber Lilith, aka single target. Since then the meta has developed, builds have slightly changed or improved, and we have those new Malignant Rings for each class. Looking back, the old rankings went like this. 5th place was to Druid, 4th was to Necromancer or Rogue depending on circumstance, leaving 2nd place to Barbarian, and finally the top spot to Sorcerers, using Ball Lightning of course. The funny thing with these rankings is that every class is feeling amazing right now. There's not a single class that doesn't convincingly take down tier 100s or Uber Lilith. It's a fantastic time. So comparing them, we get really specific. For example, Druid had overall great survivability, output, gameplay, but compared to the rest, it had lower DPS. While Necromancer feels incredible with things like Bone Spear or Infinite Mist, the very busted nature of Rogue, Barb and Sorcerer can overshadow it. How have things changed in terms of new builds or slightly refined builds anyway? How has the Malignant Ring changed the classes? Has it made an impact? Today we're talking about it. We start at number 5 then, which remains Druid for me. Once again, Druid is doing great, but compared to other classes it's lacking that oomph, the huge burst that just seems to be broken that every other class seems to have. Druid actually has a ton of not just viable but brilliant endgame options. Tornado Wolf, Stormclaw, the tanky Pulverize, or even the Mimi Boulder build, which actually has great single target. And that's made even better with that new Malignant Ring. Now dubbed the Inexorable Will Ring, when casting an ultimate skill, you pull in distant enemies and deal damage to them based on willpower. To say the least, that's been incredible for the Druid's mob clear and open world, and of course tier 100s where grouping up packs of enemies and then destroying them in batches works and feels amazing. The issue remains though that their raw power is lower than the other classes. The ring is not helping with that in terms of an impactful single target burst improver. So while Druid as a whole is better at everything with that ring, even single target slightly, this update, if anything, solidifies the fact that the rankings are further apart. Druid is more of a very solidified number 5 of the 5. So Druid is fantastic right now, but none of its builds seem to be broken and almost too strong like the others. Above that at number 4 then has to be Necromancer. Despite the incredible addition of the sacrilegious Malignant Ring, I think it deserves to be number 4. It's interesting with Necromancer. I thought Bone Spear might still be dominant in Season 2. I thought Shadow Damage over time builds would be really good, maybe the winners. But it turns out Bone Spear is absolutely insane and probably the best, and Shadow Damage over times are also just really good. Infinite Mist builds of all kinds, dumbstering current tier 100 content like it's nothing. So fast and without any thought. But it definitely struggles single target compared to say Bone Spear that dominates with really high DPS. And you know, the blood builds are even better than expected. I've destroyed Uber Lilith in comparable speed to the Bone Spear, and I've had a much easier time in the tier 100s with Bloodlance or of course Blood Surge than even Bone Spear because yeah, blood builds are more survivable. They just have more requirements like awareness of your timing on your key passive, making sure you're healthy to maximize your DPS, where Bone Spear just throws the spears. Basically, I think there's at least 3 top builds for Necromancer. All of them have benefited from the new ring. The Sacrilegious Ring provides us with an incredible auto corpse explosion and skeleton summon every 1 second, and compared to the original Malignant Heart version in Season 1, we're even better here where you're not getting a damage reduction. Of course, it also auto triggers corpse tendrils every 8 seconds on a top roll, which is great, though harder to get your hands on a top roll compared to say the hearts in Season 1. So it's an incredible ease of life update for Necromancers. If you think Bone Spear is their best build, it just makes that gameplay smoother, but it comes at the cost of slightly better DPS because it's a ring slot. You have to make some kind of sacrifice, and even though in most cases it's worth it, it is a sacrifice. Meanwhile, with the 2nd and 1st slot, their rings are just literally insane, and most everyone would just equip them. So despite the impressive nature of current Necromancer in Season 2, I think it's very clearly overshadowed by the remaining 3 we're going to talk about. Next up at 3 then we have Rogues, who are still held back by their survivability compared to number 2 and 1 in the spots in my opinion. Just more than other classes, you have to avoid damage rather than just ignore it and mitigate it, which makes for fun and engaging mobile gameplay, but it's still a point to talk about. The main reason Rogue is so high on the list though is due to a current bug that's apparently not a bug. The literal assistant game director lump quoted Ball Lightning Sorcerer or a 16 combo point Rogue together as if they're both fine and nuts, kind of acknowledging them as builds and thinking, yep, they're going to continue in Season 2. Either way, breaking the limit on your combo points is here to stay in Season 2, and it's insanely strong for single target. The one-shot burst we're seeing on Duriel or other bosses, like most importantly Uber Lilith, literally being one-use burst by this. Necromancer and Druid just can't manage that, where Sorcerer and Barbarian can. This irons out Rogue as an at least top 3 pick right now, and you could argue second place depending on your opinion. The weakness of the build was its AoE because the setup was for more single target, but we've seen development of the build to maximize its effectiveness in AoE as well, allowing for one-shot bursts of mob packs easily with a new take on the build using Hemomancy with a bow. So rogues are clearing tier 100s using this build and bug super well, on top of having their insane single target DPS. Did that new Malignant Ring come into that? No, it mattered the least of all the classes in their new rings. It's kind of funny. Basically, once every 12 seconds, enemies look away from you for 3 seconds and take a bit of damage. It's actually a bad thing. Cotton was telling me that it even has a health bar so they can kill it faster than those 3 seconds. It's just silly. Still, Rogue is in a very strong place right now, separate from the ring, potentially even second place worthy, but let's talk about that. At second place for me is Barbarian. 2 weeks back, we saw Rob268 land that hilarious 1 billion hit using a Hammer of Ancients build. While that's really cool, the fact is these guys are dealing hundreds of millions of damage in one hit regularly, crushing anything they choose to target instantly. Barbs are naturally tanky, they've got the massive damage potential obviously, impressive movement speed, and they're fantastic in a party. And while you could argue if Rogue and even Sorcerer are working correctly right now, it seems that Barb's just working as it should. They've been given incredible damage in Season 2, especially with the guaranteed overpower potential. The downside of Barb is basically its leveling experience, which doesn't matter here, and you could argue that the mob clear with the hammer build can be awkward since they have smaller cleave and AoE potential than other classes and other builds. But I am grasping at straws to criticize. The new ring has made everything better. The one-shot potential of Barb has become more consistent, turning Duriel one-shots into every single time. 400 million, 500, 700 million in one hit without massive build-up to make that happen. You can literally one-shot a world boss with this, so it's ridiculous. The ring, Red Furor, makes your next hammer, upheaval, or death blow a guaranteed crit, but also dealing up to 30% times more damage. You just need to spend 100 Fury beforehand to get a 3-second buff to get that guarantee, which is basically just cast 2 Fury spenders like 2 hammers and you're good to go. Combine that with the Overpower Amulet and Tibault's Will and it gets silly instantly, especially if you were to have an Uber unique like the Grandfather such as Rob has in these clips. Basically, you can set up for a harder single hit whenever you'd like, much more consistently. So it's a big impactful update for them, but I still don't think it takes the top spot. Which brings us to number 1, but like super number 1 now, the Ball Lightning Sorcerer. While there's a pile of different versions and takes on the Ball Lightning build, ultimately it comes down to generating a ton of lightning balls and watching anything and everything melt away. While the Sorcerers can't land 1 billion in one hit or overcap their class system to make one hit strong, they don't need to. They're constantly outputting such insane DPS that it's all going to die simply by being near you. And they're very consistent with that, with comparatively no setup, putting them up there in the best for single target. But also, they're the clear best winner for a tier 100 clear or speed clear, open world content or whatever. The balls rotate around you, so you simply walk to the objective while anything near you just dies. Sorcerers are outrageously fast because of their movement and teleporting, so they clear tier 100s in record times too. Me, I'm happy to clear a tier 100 in like 4 minutes. Josh on his Sorcerer barely has to pay attention and can do it in a minute. And they're also just like really tanky for like a cloth covered character. The thing is, they only got stupider with the Malignant Ring update. For each type of element damage you deal, gain up to 15% times increased damage for 4 seconds, refreshed by element damage. Josh explained it to me that this means up to 60% times damage to everything permanently, so having this ring on is just a straight major damage increase, and not one that requires certain setup or anything. It's just get in combat, it gets going and stays going. I was thrilled to have my Necromancer auto corpse stuff, but this just laughs at that. So yeah, not much more to say. Sorcerers were winning early Season 2, and I think they're definitely winning mid-Season 2. That brings us to the conclusion though. And while the order of the classes is pretty much the same as the pre-Malignant Ring update, the builds have improved, been cleaned up, and I actually think the gap between these rankings is a lot bigger. I'd say Druid is further behind everyone by a more noticeable amount now, even though they're in a fantastic state. And despite Necromancer being strong as hell and got that quality of life improver, I think it falls behind combined a lot compared to Rogue, which is literally busted, Barb dealing world boss ending damage in one hit, and then Ball Lightning Sorcerer. Just 60% times improved. Things are just crazy in Season 2, but it's also just a lot of fun. It's going to be interesting to see how much of a challenge those Blood Forges actually will be with all of our crazy power we have. But for now, I've been HotA, you've been you. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.